The traditional multi-factor authentication scheme relies on a third-party service to transmit an extra factor to the user, which can be vulnerable to online attacks. In contrast, a triple identity authentication scheme is proposed, which associates three identities with the login credentials username, password, and hash value to provide robust security without relying on a third-party service. This scheme defines identities for the username and login password, allowing the system to verify the identifiers at the username and password forms in succession, in addition to traditional server verification. The identifiers are managed by the system, concealed, incommunicable, inaccessible, and independent of personal information, making them useless in online attacks. The proposed scheme utilizes a dual password login authentication system, where a login password entered by a user is converted into an authentication password using a hash algorithm called the quasi-matrix password converter. During registration, the system converts the login password into the authentication password and selects some hash elements to define an identifier, which is bound to the login password entered through a subscribed smartphone. This approach provides a more robust authentication system that does not require the support of a third-party service. The proposed system leverages a hash algorithm to generate a unique username or convert a user's email address or phone number into a personalized username converter. This converter binds a selected set of hash elements to create a unique identifier, which is linked to the user's subscribed smartphone. For server-side verification, the system combines the IMEI and IMSI numbers to form a triple identity authentication scheme, where the user's identifier is bound to an authentication password. The system's dual password login authentication mechanism is achieved through a quasi-matrix password converter, which operates in the background to generate incommunicable, inaccessible, and independent hash elements. These elements define truly unique and unforgeable identities for all login credentials of a user account. The quasi-matrix converter allows users to compose authentication passwords using characters from any language, and the system can select hash elements in multiple ways, including element rows, columns, or combinations, to generate an identifier. This triple identity authentication scheme enables users to manage their login and authentication passwords separately, with varying password strengths. The login password can be set within a specific range of 5 to 15 characters, while the authentication password can be specified to be 20 characters long with at least 4 character classes. Unlike traditional user authentication systems, the proposed system associates all three credentials, username, login password, and authentication password, with the user's identity, providing enhanced security. By eliminating the need for transmitting multi-factor authentication factors via the network, the system reduces security risks. The registration process for the dual password login authentication system involves defining identities for the username and login password using hash algorithms. During registration, the user provides personal information, and the system collects identification information from their smartphone, including the phone number, IMEI, and IMSI numbers. The server stores this information in a database. The user can create a unique username or convert their email address or phone number into a personalized username using a hash algorithm. The system generates a UN identifier by combining hash elements and associates it with a personalized username. This allows the user to use a unique username instead of their email address or phone number. The registration process for the login password involves generating a quasi-matrix password converter, which selects hash elements to define the LP identifier and associates it with the login password entered via the subscribed smartphone. Similarly, the system defines the identity of the authentication password with the subscribed smartphone and associates it with the combination of the IMEI and IMSI numbers. The verification of login identifiers involves a triple identity authentication process at the username and password forms. When a user accesses the username page, the system checks the database for a matching UN identifier by combining the personalized username with the IMEI and IMSI numbers. If a match is found, access is granted to the next step, otherwise, it is rejected. The same process is repeated for the password page, where the system checks for a matching LP identifier. The triple identity authentication scheme combines LP, IMEI, and IMSI numbers to verify user identities. It grants access to the final step only if there's a match between LP and IMEI and IMSI. The system server verifies the generated authentication password against the combination of IMEI and IMSI numbers of the subscribed smartphone. Multi-factor authentications ensure secure login processes by sending an additional code to the user's device. This method relies on the uniqueness of each smartphone's IMEI and IMSI numbers. The paper highlights that the problem with user authentication lies not in the security of login credentials but in confirming legitimate identities.